You know, my office looks right down on you, and I know it's a good crowd, but it's even bigger when I see it. I just want to tell you, I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud of America's Constitution, and I yearn for the day when we have an administration that will start following our Constitution again. We have such a brave and proud history of following the rule of law. That's been taken from us. Let's do everything we can to take back the rule of law and show the rest of the world what America really is. And when Congress last year committed an historic mistake by suspending the great writ of habeas corpus, not just for those confined at Guantanamo, but for millions of legal residents here in the United States, we ought to do two things. Restore the writ of habeas corpus and close Guantanamo. We should do both. And we would show the true face of America, of a good and great nation, if we close Guantanamo, if we restore habeas corpus, go back to the basic roots of America. Now today, we mark a day of action to restore law and justice. If you want to do that, restoring habeas corpus is the first but the most important step. It was recklessly undermined, as said just now in last year's Military Commissions Act. And for those who say we have to do this to make us safer, shame on you. Shame on you. For those who say we have to worry about terrorists, I go to work every day in a building that was marked for destruction by terrorists. I go there proudly. I go there happily. But I go there because I hope we can uphold our laws. Not run in fear, but uphold our laws. And what we did, eliminating habeas corpus, that was an action driven by fear. And I'll tell you, there was another example of that in World War II. They thought by locking up tens of thousands of loyal Japanese Americans, we'd make ourselves safer. We didn't make ourselves safer. We put a stain on America's reputation in the world. Let's not do it again. This is a time of testing. Future generations will look back to examine the choices we made. The choices we made during a time when security too often is used as a watchword to convince us to slacken our defense of liberty and the rule of law. Habeas corpus guarantees an opportunity for every one of you to go to court and challenge the abuse of power by the government. The Military Commissions Act rolled back these protections by eliminating that right permanently for any non-citizen labeled an enemy combatant, even someone who, quote, is awaiting that determination. They could await that determination in Guantanamo for the rest of their lives with no habeas corpus. That is truly un-American. And it goes beyond Guantanamo. It affects the 12 million lawful permanent residents in the United States today. It affects even those people who come as tourists to our land on a valid visa. But it affects people who are working as professors, who are working as scientists, people who work and pay taxes, who abide by our laws. If they're doing that, shouldn't they be entitled to the same fair treatment as everybody else? You know, since last fall, I was one of the few who voted against this law, but I've been talking about a nightmare scenario. Involves a hard-working legal permanent resident picked up on a tenuous factual basis who could be held with no ability to go to court to plead his or her innocence for years or decades. And last November, just after enactment of these provisions, the Department of Justice That's run by Attorney General Alberto Gonzales. With the not so subtle hand of the Vice President behind him. I'll say it again. But the Department of Justice confirmed this sad scenario in a legal brief submitted in federal court in Virginia. They said, and I had called them the Department of Injustice for saying this, they asserted that the Military Commissions Act allows the government to detain any non-citizen designated as an enemy combatant, even someone arrested and held in the United States, without giving that person any ability to challenge the detention in court. This is wrong. It is unconstitutional. It is un-American. And for those who tell you they have to do this to stand up for America, they're not standing up for America. They're destroying America by doing that. Let us stand up. Let us stand up for America and restore America's Constitution. That's standing up for America. And this is neither liberal nor conservative. David Keene, who's here today, head of the American Conservative Union, agreed this change betrays centuries of legal tradition and practice. But you know, the most powerful, for me at least, the last month's Senate hearing that I held on this was the testimony of Rear Admiral Donald Gooder. He was working in his office in the Pentagon on September 11, 2001. He saw his friends killed in that terrorist attack. And as he said, as we limit the rights of human beings, even those of the enemy, we become more like the enemy. That makes us weaker, imperils our valiant troops serving not just in Iraq and Afghanistan, but around the world. He was right. Whether you're a soldier, a great and good nation like ours, it's hard to defend the higher ground by taking the lower road. You can't do it. The world knows what our enemies stand for, but the world has to know what this great and good country has tried to stand up for and live up to in the best of times, but especially in the worst of times. So join me in a grassroots crusade to restore habeas rights. The elimination of these rights undermines, it doesn't strengthen our ability to achieve justice. It is from strength that America should defend our values and our way of life. It's from the strength of our freedoms, our constitutions, our rule of law, that we shall prevail. Woo! So work with me on this. Restore America to America. Thank you.
So this is going to be very short, you're pleased to know. Thank you all for being here today. Thanks for raising your voices. I'm the leader of a bill to shut down Guantanamo, and I'm going to talk about that. I especially want to thank all my fellow Iowans who came all the way here on a bus to be here today. Thank my Iowans. My friends, today there is something that we need more than any Patriot Act. We need acts of patriots. We need good Americans to stand up to George Bush and Dick Cheney and to say, no, you will not torture in our names. You will not throw people into prison without habeas corpus. You will not destroy our shining city on a hill. Now, you know, I've been reading the Washington Post series on Dick Cheney. Those of you who've just been here, they've just started a whole series on Dick Cheney's advocacy of torture, his dismissive attitude towards laws that get in his way. He knows no boundaries. Now, he doesn't even acknowledge that he's a part of the executive branch. So we're going to have to rewrite all our civics books. We now have 4 branches of government. We have the legislative, we have the executive, we have the judicial, and we have the Cheney branch of government. But I want you all to know that I'm especially concerned about the prison at Guantanamo. which has become synonymous with abuse and lawlessness. As I said last month, I introduced a bill to shut it down. My bill would transfer the hardcore terrorists to Fort Leavenworth, and the others, the great majority of those at Guantanamo, would have their legal statuses resolved once and for all. Now, some of you who are a little bit older may remember, the younger ones may not. You can read it in your history books, but this is personal with me. 37 years ago, this next month, as a congressional staffer, I played a role in taking the pictures and exposing the tiger cages on Con Son Island off of Vietnam, where ordinary Vietnamese civilians were being held incommunicado. They were tortured, killed, all with the full sanction and knowledge of the U.S. government. There are disturbing parallels between that secret Vietnamese prison on Con Son and Guantanamo. In both cases, the prisons were deliberately set up on remote islands, out of sight, out of the way of nosy reporters who might want to find out what's going on. In both cases, detainees were not classified as prisoners of war in order to deny them the protections of the Geneva Conventions. In both cases, detainees were deprived of any right to due process, judicial review, or a fair trial. And in both cases, when the abuses were exposed, the United States stood stripped naked in front of the world community of hypocrisy, betraying its ideals, and violating international law. Even President Bush sees a problem. He said, and I quote, "No question," this is what President Bush said, "no question, Guantanamo sends a signal to some of our friends, provides an excuse to say the United States is not upholding the values that they're trying to encourage other countries to adhere to." Well, Mr. President, you finally got something right. That's exactly. And Mr. President, we have the perfect solution. Mr. President, tear down that prison. And while you're at it, stop spreading fear and paranoia.
Right, absolutely.
Stop betraying our ideals and values. We can defeat our enemies without becoming like them. So we have a simple message to President Bush and Vice President Cheney in his undisclosed location, wherever that might be. Our national anthem still says we're the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we're not going to let anybody take that away from us. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. I won't say it's a great pleasure to be here today, which is usually how I start off addressing groups, because it's not. Never mind the heat, but it's not a pleasure to have to be here and to have to say, let's restore what we always thought we had.
My brother did
Let's restore what we always knew.
And he's being sent back again, he's being railroaded. My brother did it on his own.
Let's restore American liberty. This country, for all its flaws, has always been a beacon of liberty. We pioneered liberty. We pioneered liberty under law. And yet, we have always had a number of flaws. We've always had a number of besmirches on our record. In most of our wars historically, not all of them, but in most of our wars, we have taken actions in the name of national security that trampled upon liberty. And every single one, and the record goes from the Alien and Sedition Acts during the Quasi-War with France in 1798, to the suspension of habeas corpus temporarily during the Civil War, to the Espionage Act of 1917, the Palmer Raids of 1919, the Smith Act of 1940, the detention of Japanese-American citizens in internment camps during World War II, the depredations of the McCarthy era in the early days of the Cold War, the FBI's COINTELPRO operations against anti-Vietnam War protesters. We have done things that have trampled liberty in the name of national security. They all have one thing in common. They all have one thing in common. The historians unanimously write 30 years later, they didn't help national security, but they did trample liberty. usually we end up apologizing for them about 30 years later. In 1988, Congress passed a bill for reparations to Japanese Americans interned during World War II. We are following in that tradition now, unfortunately. During this so-called war on terrorism, we have now abolished habeas corpus. Imagine that, abolish habeas corpus. And we've done far worse. We've done more than that. This president claims the power to point his finger at anybody and say, you are an enemy combatant, because I say so. And because I say so, we are going to throw you in jail forever, with no hearing, no confrontation with witnesses, no presentation of witnesses, no due process of any kind. We're going to throw you in jail forever. No executive authority, no executive in an English-speaking country has claimed such tyrannical power since before Magna Carta was passed 800 years ago. Magna Carta established the right of habeas corpus. And for those of you who, like me, for some unaccountable reason, spent a few years taking high school Latin, you know that habeas corpus means habeas corpus. Bring the body, Sir King. Bring the body, bring the prisoner in front of a neutral magistrate and show some evidence as to why this person, under law, should be deprived of liberty, should be held. You, the king, do not have the authority to hold a person except upon probable cause of a crime proved in front of a neutral magistrate. That was habeas corpus. That was binding on the King of England. It should be binding on the President of the United States. If you read the Declaration of Independence, and nobody does, we all know the first couple of paragraphs, we hold these truths to be self-evident and so forth. But if you actually read the Declaration of Independence, most of it is a laundry list of complaints against the king, of such egregious, terrible invasions of liberty, acts of tyranny that the king had committed, as to justify violent revolution and violent rebellion and break away from the British crown. One of those actions, quoted in the Declaration of Independence, one of those dastardly actions, justifying violent revolution in the mind of Thomas Jefferson. He has conspired with others, namely Parliament, we don't want to name them. He has conspired with others to deprive us of the benefits of trial by jury, unquote. We have done this. President Bush has gone one better. We are now depriving people of the rights of trial, period, by jury or otherwise. We rebelled against George III for far less than this, and George V should profit from his example. We must. If anyone had told me, if anyone had told me at any time since I first studied civics in 7th grade that one day I would be in Congress, and while I was in Congress, I would have occasion to introduce a bill titled the Habeas Corpus Restoration Act, I would have said, you're crazy. We've had it for 800 years. We don't have to restore it. But we do. There is nothing more important in this country today, nothing, than to restore habeas corpus. Nothing more important than to restore American liberty. Nothing more important than to reestablish the principle that nobody, no president, no Congress, no king, no emperor, nobody can hold people in jail and deprive them of liberty without due process of law. That's what this country, in one respect, is unique among countries on the earth. It was not founded as a collection of racially or ethnically homogeneous people. It was founded on an idea. And the idea was liberty, liberty under law. And that idea is now under challenge as it has never been challenged before. We must vindicate it, we must restore liberty under law, we must restore habeas corpus, and we must kick out these ignoramuses who have no idea what they're doing.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for standing up for the principles of our country. And those of you who are from Maryland, thank you for giving me the honor of representing you in the United States Senate. We need your help. There are countries and leaders who believe that it is our right to use torture. There are countries and world leaders who believe it is okay to detain people for years without giving them the right to challenge their detention. There are leaders and countries who believe it's okay to do anything in the name of national security. Unfortunately, one of those countries is the United States of America. We stand up for the principles of our country. We say that habeas corpus must be restored. We say that it's wrong ever to use torture. Torture is wrong. We say that everyone has basic human rights. It was the former Secretary of State, Colin Powell, who said America is losing its moral compass in its fight against terrorism. We need to be world leaders standing up for human rights. That's our heritage. We are making change. Things are different. There has been a change. The Judiciary Committee in the United States Senate, under the leadership of Senator Leahy, has passed out a legislation to restore habeas corpus. We're making some progress. For years, I have asked the Helsinki Commission to hold hearings on Guantanamo Bay. We, the human rights, a part of the Helsinki Commission is to stand up and fight human rights violations wherever it might be, including in the United States. This past week, the Helsinki Commission held the hearing on Guantanamo Bay. It's time to close. It's way past time to close Guantanamo Bay. We have made a difference. Your presence here in record numbers on a very hot afternoon. You're making a difference. You're speaking out for what is important in America. And we are going to stand up and never be quiet. To speak out for the human rights of every person in the United States and in the world. Thank you again for joining us today.
Coming to walk today. This is a group of patriots. You are patriots. There's no more patriotic act than to defend the Constitution of the United States. The ACLU and others to gather here on this very warm June day to say to America, to say to the Congress, to say to all who will listen, there are many issues before us, but none more important than defending the rights of each and every individual American and those who live on our shores to know that the Constitution is there permanently for them. And we're going to defend it to protect it. I carry every day my copy of the Constitution of the United States. We urge you in the coming hours here as you travel these halls to talk to members of Congress. This is not a question that ought to be divided based on political ideology. Every single American ought to understand the danger of walking away from habeas corpus, of having this nation resort to torture to solicit information, or walk away from the Geneva Convention. It's why I introduced the Restoration of Constitution Act. It's why when I was asked back in New Hampshire in that debate
What is the first thing I would do if elected President of the United States? I'd restore the Constitution. I want to thank the 12,000 people in this country who have become citizen co-sponsors of the Restoration of the Constitution Act. Over these coming weeks, we're going to ask our colleagues to vote and support legislation to restore habeas corpus, to get rid of torture as a means of soliciting information, and to get back to endorsing the Geneva Conventions. That's what the United States ought to be doing. So I thank all of you for coming down to be a part of this. You're an inspiration. You're an inspiration to all of us here about the importance of this issue. And so we take your message to heart. We'll do everything possible to restore these acts and to see to it that America gets back on its feet again.